Well, it seems South Africans are no longer getting their COVID-19 jabs. More than 7.6 million Pfizer vaccines have expired in the country. At least 3.2 million of those expired in March, while over 4 million expired in April. Let's bring in Executive Director and Editor of the Bhekisisa Centre for Health Journalism, Mia Malan, for more on this. Mia, always great to speak to you. Now, most of us understand expiry dates in terms of food. That's our sort of, likely experience, as well as medicine. Safe to use before that date. After that, not so much. And even more so with medicine. So how come the expiry dates on vaccines can be extended by as much as 6 months?
So good evening. It is important to remember that the Pfizer vaccine that we're talking about is an mRNA vaccine. And it's the first time that we've used the mRNA vaccine so far. So no one really knows for how long does it stay stable and can we use it. So when we hear about expiry dates of Pfizer vaccines, they're not necessarily the end of the shelf life of the vaccine. They're rather the expiry date that we see for then. So if you would recall, during COVID, we often heard about expiry dates of Pfizer vaccines being extended. So what happens is every 3 months, scientists test the vaccines, see if they're still stable. If they are, then they are extended for another 3 months. In this case, scientists think they may still last for another 6 months. But at the moment, these vaccines are all in quarantine because you can't just voluntarily, scientists can't just test the vaccines and then extend the expiry dates. Pfizer, the company that produces the vaccines, have to apply with our medicine regulator, SAHPRA, to get permission to extend the expiry date. And according to the health department, that application will only happen in early June.
So tell us about, you said that they're under quarantine. How are they being stored or kept stable during this period?
So if you want Pfizer vaccines to last for the longest period possible, you need to store them at very low temperatures, freezing temperatures of -70 degrees Celsius. So at the moment, those vaccines are all being stored in central facilities of the health department. So they're not being distributed and they're being stored at that low temperature.
So it seems a bit of a contradiction that people can't get hold of them now, but we want people to be able to have access to them later. And by the time that access is granted, a couple of months of those 6 months will already have passed and we'll have less time to fully utilize those vaccines.
Yes, so I don't think it will take many months to have the extension dates approved if they do prove to be stable, the remaining vaccines. It's likely more in the region of 2 or 3 weeks. But in the meantime, we do have Johnson & Johnson vaccines available in the country. There are more than 21 million doses, and those are different batches. They all expire between the end of June and the end of February next year. And the J&J vaccines come with 2-year expiry dates because the technology that they use is technology that has been used in vaccines before. So scientists know that that type of vaccine lasts for about 24 months. So that's why we don't hear about J&J extension dates of expiry dates all the time, but rather from mRNA vaccines because it's new technology.
What if scientists told us, this far, down the line about which of the two have been more efficacious?
So I think each of those work in a different way. The uptake of mRNA vaccines in Western countries have been very high, but I think it becomes dangerous to compare vaccines so explicitly because they all are effective. For instance, the AstraZeneca vaccine is effective as well. I think the issue today that we look sort of after the 2 years of lockdown is more about the aftermath of long COVID that is becoming quite significant in many people that have had COVID. And there's some evidence that shows that if you had your first shot of vaccine before you had your first bout of COVID, we've almost all had COVID, but pretty much everyone has had it, then it provides some protection against long COVID, but that evidence has not been consistent. Some studies, it was a bit weaker than the original findings.
If we have so many doses, that we want to get extended, we obviously have to look at the demand. What are we seeing in terms of people, still getting either vaccinated or getting their boosters?
I think it's quite well established that the uptake has dramatically decreased in South Africa. I don't have the figures of how many people go for boosters or for first-time vaccines at the moment, but if we just look at the dramatic decrease of the number of sites that do have vaccines available, then it's a very clear indication that that uptake is now lower. Now, for boosters, everyone don't necessarily need to go and have a booster, but where it becomes important is if you're older, if you're more vulnerable to getting very ill with COVID, and also if you have another condition, for instance, if you live with obesity or diabetes, then it might be a good idea to have a booster. Or if you think you're going to travel, for instance, and be in a plane for a long time, or exposed to, say, lots of people in a venue, in a closed venue, then it might be good for you to time your booster for about a month before you go.
A couple of people, as we head into winter, that I've been around have mentioned that they've had worse flu than they've had in their lives after COVID. And many people now, given sort of, where we are in the season, might be considering getting their flu vaccine. Would you say get your flu vaccine or rather get your COVID vaccine? Can you have them both at the same time?
So I'm not a doctor, but the health department's guidelines say that you can have both of those. So you don't have to choose between a flu and a COVID vaccine. You can have both, and they, of course, have different germs that cause the diseases.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that update. Executive Director and Editor of the Bhekisisa Centre for Health Journalism, Malan, giving us an update on some COVID-19 Pfizer vaccines that have lapsed. Hopefully they will get extended.